Hey folks, Matt McQueenie of the Mix Minus Podcast. It is September 11th, 2018. I'm doing something a little different on this episode. There was an episode that I did back in January of 2017 with my friend Joshua Jacobs. And immediately after that episode, we had him host the podcast where he was interviewing me, and it was to be the first podcast of what he's hoping to be his own show called Josh Off the Press. And it went really well. The sound was good. It was a very good continuation of our discussion that we had just had. And with it being September 11th today, I just weirdly remembered that in that episode, I kind of told my experiences with September 11th in detail. And when I went back and listened to the episode, which did not get very big audience because it was just sort of a test episode, I also thought that the content on it was very good and very evergreen. So I'm going to go ahead and release this in my own feed and let everyone kind of hear this conversation and hear the September 11th stories. And so we're going to kick it off now. It is going to be Josh starting it off because, again, it was to be his first episode of his podcast using my studio. So with this opening, you'll understand why it kind of morphs into this. But just kind of enjoy. And again, we'll never forget.
Hello. This is Josh Jacobs. My very first podcast, Josh Off the Press, using Matthew McQueenie's studio. Mix Minus Podcast was just a guest on that show for the second time. Thank you so much, Matthew. Here I am, starting up my own podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you to Matthew for essentially pushing me into the lake, because I was coming on here thinking I would be a guest on his show alone. But he's like, no, you're going to do your own podcast. And I'm like, out of the stove into the fire. So thank you, sir. I definitely would not have done it so quickly on my own volition, but I appreciate the opportunity and the privilege to produce my own content.
Absolutely. I feel as though I just want to start asking you questions.
You're going to ask me questions?
Because we're in my studio.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot to podcasting. When you're the host, there are nerves because it's your own show.
Uh-huh.
But I think there's actually, I would debate whether there's more nerves on the guest part or on the host part, because the host knows where it's going. And so I sit here as a guest not knowing where it's going. But maybe we should just be conversational as we were in the one we just ended 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, well, I almost feel like this is a continuation of our previous conversation, or rather it's more like a
barnstorming tour.
Yeah, I guess so. Or it's like the second half of the story. You know, it's almost as if there was a break, or it's like an intermission. We're at some kind of Broadway show or something. Intermission. Okay, now we're just kind of flipping the script a little bit.
Yeah. You're playing Juliet. I'm playing Romeo now.
I guess so. Juliet. Well, you know, if you remember Romeo and Juliet, Juliet was the one that died in the more barbaric way. So
that's true. The only one I remember is the Claire Danes one. Really.
I don't remember that.
Was that even good? It was like Leo and Claire. Was that good?
I don't know. I'm just thinking of the book, actually. I mean, Romeo and Juliet has been done so many times and so many different stories. You could find it. You just look for the patterns in it.
Do you read a lot of that stuff? Do you read plays or just from school?
So I guess there's certain things that I guess will be replicated. So I recently just started a new job just before the Christmas break. I started at the local high school near my town. I'm a permanent building substitute teacher. It's exciting. I've been trying to get into a teacher certification program, and I've hit a couple speed bumps. And this has given me an opportunity to get into the field of teaching, something that I've been pursuing for a while now. I've bounced around from different careers and learned a lot of different things. And I'm like, you know what? I love people. I love young people. I love learning. I love teaching, sharing what I have to offer. Teaching is the field that speaks to me. This is what I want to do. Yeah. Of course, I love podcasts. And Matthew's like, Matthew, why am I saying you in third person? Matthew, you're like, well, I think it's time you do a podcast. And the feedback I got from the first podcast I did with you, a lot of people said, Josh, when are you going to do your podcast? I'm like, something I always thought about. Yeah, I think I'll do it. And you're like, all right, here's the microphone, Josh. So thank you. Again.
Teaching is like podcasting.
I guess so. You're right.
To a smaller audience, right? Well, it depends. Right?
It depends. I mean, if you're Tim Ferriss, is not.
Yeah. Well, it's a little less Little less nerve-wracking probably, doing a podcast, and you have this kind of imagined audience, whereas with kids, you're right in front of them. It's real. It's in the moment. Are kids good these days, or are they troublemakers?
They're troublemakers all the time. What was it? There was. I remember my guidance counselor had this this poster up of a quote saying, kids these days, they just run amok all the time. They're a bunch of trouble. And it's some quote from like the 1200s, kids are kids. That's what I think. Kids are kids. I was actually telling a friend of mine, he's like, what's it like with these troublemakers? You run into any really bad kids? I'm like, no, not really. But at the same time, I actually like the fact that I have kids that maybe are rambunctious, want to get out of their seat. It means they still have their spirit, that school hasn't beaten them down too bad yet. And my buddy's like, Josh, you need to start your own charter school. You got to have a bigger vision here.
Wow, that quick.
That's what he's saying, because he's saying I have a good context for the kids, and I think so. I think that's really important, the context you have for the kids. Like I'm expecting great things from these kids. Granted, I'm a substitute teacher, but that's okay. Like I am looking for the greatness in them. And the thing is, they really just want to be listened to and be connected, even if they're not openly saying that, but they want to be connected, And I think as a teacher, teachers are role models, whether they realize it or not, even though they might get crapped on sometimes and stuff. It's kind of like being like a parent. Like your kid might not listen to you, or you don't think they are, but they really are. They're really receiving it. Yeah. And me and you are both intimately familiar with that. My daughter's going to be 3 in March. Your son just turned 2. Yeah. So.
Well, it's funny. I heard David Shaw on the Peter King's Monday Morning Quarterback, the head coach of Stanford, and he really he took this very seriously when he was talking. And I believe in this guy a lot. I think he's almost military good, like he's a good guy, good principles. He'll probably be a great NFL head coach someday. But he said, I love doing this, and I'll never forget the not the reward, but like the investment that is being dropped off with me. That these are the most important things, people in these parents' lives that are being dropped off from me to take and move to the next stage in life. And I never forget that. I thought that was a really interesting way to think about it, because you don't really think about that a lot in college sports. You think of them almost as transactional units in a sport that they don't get paid in. They get, they get their scholarship, which whatever that means. But to think of it that way, that's the kind of guy you want to send probably your kids to.
Absolutely.
I think it's teaching too.
Sounds like John Wooden. Actually, John Wooden had that kind of philosophy. I remember hearing stories about John Wooden, that he would teach his players the first day of practice how to tie their shoes.
Yeah, he had a lot of great sayings.
He did. There was a really one of my favorite actually interviews that David Axelrod did was interviewing Bill Walton. Bill Walton talked about it. Bill Walton had this great reverence for his coach John Wooden, but Bill Walton's also just a great storyteller as well. He's a great interview.
Yeah, the hard part is the suspension of belief. Sometimes I don't know at times if Bill is doddering a little bit. Like if what he's saying is completely true, or if sometimes he just keeps going and talking and talking and talking, and you're like, oh, okay, this is interesting.
Well, he's very entertaining. He's just someone that I like listening to. I mean, you're right. There's a good point. I mean, I'm sure there's some embellishment, the difference between truth and fiction. It actually makes me think of, Barack Obama, President Obama is going to be out of office soon. His book, Dreams from My Father, people have critiqued it and said he embellished a lot. By the way, did you see the new Barry movie on Netflix?
No.
It came out 2 Fridays ago. I watched it right away. Yeah. Look it up right now.
Who's in it?
I don't even know who's in it. It's a Netflix made movie, and it's capturing Barack Obama, the first year he transfers to Columbia University. So he's a junior in college. You know what? I gotta watch it again. My wife didn't watch it. I'm gonna watch it with her again. But I watched it, and I wasn't that impressed. But it's like one of those movies, like, I gotta watch it again. I didn't think it was that great, but now I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, it's pretty good. It's almost like it takes a while to kind of almost resonate. Like him. Oh, absolutely.
I didn't hear anything about this. Oh, is this a Netflix original?
Yes. Oh. Yes, it was. It's interesting, but in a way, at first I was very critical of it. I'm saying, how could have the director and the writer done it better, where they could have not had to did a smorgasbord of the stories they pieced together and then create their own story. And maybe they couldn't, but I've actually, I guess in a way, I really am a Barack Obama admirer. I actually have a tendency to binge on like political books. Like before the election, I was getting myself ready for victory. Oh, it's going to be essentially Barack Obama's third term, Hillary Clinton as president. And I read The Message by Richard Wolff. I think it was that British guy. He's sometimes on MSNBC. It was his third book on Barack Obama. What was it? I think Renegade was first because that was the code name. I read that one. And then there was Revival, and then The Message about his reelection. Oh, actually, before that, I read Jonathan Alter's
The Bridge?
No, The Bridge is
Remnick?
Yeah, it's Remnick. That was good. I read that right after I read that in the summer of 2010. So, no, Jonathan Alter wrote The Promise, which was
The Promise,
capturing Obama's first year, but then he wrote The Center Holds about Obama's reelection.
Huh.
Yeah, and that was good. That was very in-depth. It took me a lot longer to read than I thought. And with me, as I'm sure you know, what I do is when I read it and I see a page that captures my interest, I dog-ear the page. So I have all these pages dog-eared, and it's almost like every other page. And then after I'm done reading it, I go through it and I try and find what interests me in it. And I like Google search it. And then like I put it on a Word document. Kind of like when you told me how Nuno Damasio was so impressed because I emailed him my list of notes from his book on Bill Parcells. Yeah. It's like that. I do that with every book. I've gotten really good at that too. It's like a skill that you develop over time.
What do you do with them? Do you like search? Do you think of something and then like search for it? Or you can't even search really in a Word. You should get this in Evernote.
Well, I should. You know what I do is like I said, you're more of a technologically savvy guy. You're going to teach me about this, especially if my podcast is going to succeed. I need to be more up to speed. What I do is I get it on a Microsoft Word document. I copy and paste it, put it on my Gmail. I put it there, and then I attach the Word document. I usually keep it in drafts until I'm finally done with it. And then I send it to myself and I just put it in like a folder I created on Gmail. So I can just do like book review. Okay. And I find a Gmail, they all pop up there, and I've done a lot of them. I really started doing this more vigilantly when I was in the Peace Corps in Zambia. But there I didn't have a computer. I literally was just writing notes. I have to go over these old books that I wrote and stuff, because I was doing it. I had a lot of free time to read because you kind of, part of I can talk about it another time, but part of the Peace Corps experience is just kind of, you're doing a lot of capacity building and sustainable development projects, but a lot of it is just kind of hanging out in your village and just interacting with the people and just living your life as like an African farmer.
How often did you shower?
I took bucket baths daily.
Oh, bucket baths?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes if you get back to the town, you take a shower. If you want to maybe spoil yourself, you go to like a nice bougie hotel and you take a shower. But it was bucket baths. Yeah, bucket baths you take.
Are the hotels nice there? Or are they like our equivalent of like a motel?
Yeah, it all depends. I mean, usually if I was going to go somewhere, spend overnight, usually just stay in a motel. So sometimes the shower head would be really cold. So for me, I would boil my water and take a bucket bath, put some cold water and just do it. So sometimes it wasn't as thorough. But yeah, sometimes I would, even in the hot season, Zambia had like 3 seasons: hot, dry, cool, dry, and hot, wet. The hot, dry season, I'd probably be taking bucket baths twice a day.
Really?
Yeah.
And what did you eat there?
Shima is the food.
What is a shima?
Or they call it insima. So what it is Northern Province did a little different. They use cassava leaves, but where I was in Eastern Province, it's cornmeal, powdered cornmeal. So it's like corn. You take it off the cob and you grind it. You take it through a grinding machine and it's powder, and then you throw it in boiling hot water. And it kind of condenses together, and you put lumps, and it's like the staple food. And what they do is you need a bottle of cooking oil, and with the cooking oil, you spread it all over something. Like you might just be eating some kind of vegetable, but the oil there kind of gives you the flavor, and you dip the shima in that. Like you could literally split one chicken with like 6 people, and you only have a little bit of the chicken, but because of the cooking oil, you get that great sauce. You usually have a vegetable on the side, and you just eat the shima. You dip it in the sauce, and you eat it, and you put the vegetables in it and stuff. It's a staple food.
Was it hard to keep weight up?
Yeah, okay. That's an interesting question. So yeah, actually, I was thinner than I ever was. So when I was in the village, there was one point I got down to probably like 154 pounds, and that was like, I haven't been that light since like 10th, 11th grade.
But you weren't like hungry all the time, right?
No, so this is how it works. It's like I came home to America once, and there I just got fat. You all the preservatives and the foods in here and stuff, you get fat. You go back, and people are like, "Oh, Joshua, you're very fat." And this is a third world country, so everyone's like, they say that is a sign of prosperity. It's a great thing. You lose the weight.
It's like Victorian.
Yeah. So how it works is like, when I went to the provincial capital, they actually had a shop right there. So you buy all the good food and everything. So what I'd often do is I would do grocery shopping for like 3 weeks worth of food. The first week or the first 5 days, I have a bunch of junk food and stuff. I'm eating it. And, I'm just eating a lot, but eventually the food runs out. But the other thing is you're seeing a lot of other people in your village that are only eating like 1 or 2 meals a day.
Right.
And you realize it's kind of like weird, just kind of always eating when everyone else is going hungry. So you kind of almost train yourself to not be hungry that much.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still eating 3 meals a day, but I'm not
when you're
snacking
always
much.
active, right?
Yeah, you're active. But the thing is, it's like you get used to it. Like here, I sometimes think like here at night, like at home, I'm like, am I really hungry? Like I want a snack, but am I really hungry? Like if I can just really discipline myself
Right.
to kind of not touch it. Yeah, I can do that. I need to get on one of those diets. I gifted you that Tim Ferriss book, and one of the sections I bookmarked for myself is the slow carb diet. I want to go on that. But I remember, I'm heavier than I ever was. I got up to like probably 222. I checked on my dad's scale. I don't have a scale at home. I was 217, and that was like Christmas Eve. I probably gained back some of the weight just eating all the good food and the candy and crap we have.
It's always weird.
Yeah.
When you gain weight and you're like, I'm still me.
Yeah, no, you're right. But
and it's like, how do others see me?
I don't know. I don't think so much about it. But 154 was too light. Ideally, 175. I'd be happy. I want to get back down to 190. And then once I'm at 190 is kind of like probably on the heavy side, optimal weight. My optimal weight is probably 175, 180 though.
One of the hardest parts with that is you see yourself every day. So it's not like we see ourselves every day, but we don't take a picture every day.
You're right.
Right. So that's almost the thing we need to do sometimes. We take the picture, and then like a couple of years ago before Liam was born, my son, I was playing basketball in town here at the high school on Monday nights in men's league. Mm-hmm. And I work out, 3-4 times a week, but adding this to the mix, first of all, I was still working out 3 or 4 times a week because I would be so shot from playing basketball on Monday night that I couldn't even like meander to the gym until like Thursday. Uh-huh. But I would do it, and just playing basketball, you're not paying attention to anything. If you keep winning, you're playing we played to like 21. You just keep winning. It's full court, and the wind from full court basketball, there's nothing like it.
Yeah,
there's nothing like it. And it's the kind that you run after a ball, or you go on a fast break and you score a layup, and then when you're running back, you go, oh my God, that hurts so much. Just your insides eating themselves from the sprinting.
Yeah.
And if you had just sprinted without the basketball on a fast break, your defenses would stop you from doing that because there would be no reason to just go all out in real life. But when you got a basketball that's ahead of you and you're going to score, you break right through those defenses, and you're coming back, and you're just. I remember coming home and I would just be like my body would be burning. I could eat anything. I was up all night reading and doing everything. Yeah. And then I remember a couple months in each year, because summer would be off because it was only open when the school was open. By a couple months in, I'd be like 192 without even thinking, without changing anything else.
Yeah.
That workout ended up being an amazing variable added into my normal workout that my body almost couldn't account for, because you couldn't expect what was going to happen. So it was used to me doing my normal lift weights for 20 minutes, do cardio for 30 minutes, maybe 40 on a good day, between stair stepper, running about 6 miles an hour. And it got used to that. And then all of a sudden you just throw in like Olympic sprinting for 6 miles. Cause a lot of times if you played a lot of games, you'd go from 7:30 to 10.
Wow.
And in no other world could you just sprint from 7:30 to 10 without a game going on, without something distracting you from the actual exercise you were doing. But it was fascinating to get down to 192. I pretty much hover around 200. I've gotten up as high as 205 or, maybe a little more, but I pretty much always stay about 200. But to just go to 192, 8 pounds off with that once a week injection of sprinting.
No, it reminds me. I mean, when I got back, my last few months in the Peace Corps, or last 6 weeks really, I was living more in a town, so I wasn't in like the village area biking. It wasn't as like rough living. I was living in like a real house then and stuff. I mean, still the power went out all the time and stuff, but it was like modern third world living as opposed to like village third world living. And I was probably at more optimum weight, 170, 175. I didn't have a car, but I would take cabs, just walk places. I didn't have the bike. It wasn't rigorous exercise. As soon as I got home, within like 2 weeks, I was back up to 190. And then I remember that fall 2010, I was working for this guy running for state assembly in Queens, and I was canvassing the neighborhood every day, and I got down to 180 just from walking like 2 to 3 hours a day for like a couple weeks, just knocking on doors, helping get elected. And I was at 180. I'm like, oh, this is great. And then within like a week of that campaign being over, I was back up to 190. I'm like,
it's a lot of work, and sometimes it's the distraction that's the best kind of exercising. You're canvassing. You're not thinking about exercising.
No.
That's a means to the canvassing is walking around.
Yeah.
I do that on a treadmill, right? So I'm reading on a treadmill. I'm not doing it to get through the run. I'm doing it because it's like one of the times I can read. But it's kind of, they exalt each other when I do them, where I'm able to clear through articles. And there's something also about running and reading that makes you almost, it's like they used to say when I was studying psychology at NYU, I forget what the one thing is, but learned response or learned reading or something, where they would say, the big joke was, if you're in some kind of state when you're studying the work, when you go to recall that work, it's best to be in that state. So they would always joke that say, so if you're high on marijuana, you're better off being high on marijuana when you're in the place where you have to recall that information because it was learned in that state.
It sounds like the flow state. What is it? There's this book called Becoming Superman or something.
Yeah.
And it talks about these flow states where you kind of hit your groove and it makes you kind of like, is it like your moments of uber productivity and stuff?
I love the groove. I get it a lot from coffee. I get it a lot from exercise. It sucks though when you get to the flip side of the groove, when the groove has run dry.
But how do you do that? How do you, for one thing, the treadmill, doesn't that wear out your knees?
No, I mean, people could say everything about anything, right? I mean, it's not like I'm running for 8 miles.
No, you're right.
I'll do like 3 miles. I don't feel like I'm destroying myself. I mean, I would think a treadmill is probably better for your knees than the street.
You're probably right. But the other question is like, I've never done that. Like if I'm going to run on a treadmill, I probably listen to something audio. Like how are you running and reading?
I tried that. No, that's how I started out. And then what happened was, that's a big period of time where you can get reading done. That's 30, 40 minutes in a day for getting reading done. Uninterrupted. You're just locked in. And actually I'll have music at the same time too.
Really? And you don't check your phone too?
No, not when I'm running. No.
That's good.
No, I can't. I mean, it's fast enough where I can't do that, but it's slow enough where I can read. So it's about 6 miles an hour for me is the way to go. So I can get through like 3 miles in about 30 minutes. It really works. I mean, what happened was there's two things I learned from my wife with exercise. One is doing cardio for a long period of time. I never did that before. I would always do like 20 minutes as fast as I possibly could to get done with it. Then I would play basketball too. From her, I learned to do like longer cardio, and it felt really good because once you break through, I find that the breakthrough happens after about 25 minutes. You just feel, you start to get the effects, the runner's high.
Yeah, the endorphins.
Feel really good, and you don't really get it till then. You can get a semblance of it early on, but you don't get it till then. And so what happened was, well, that's the one thing. The other thing is not eating before working out if I work out in the morning early. I never trusted that. I never had faith in the fact that I could do that and not be hungry. But if you work out early enough in the morning, you drink coffee, you're in good shape. It's
you
totally
can have
fine.
Coffee before you work out.
Absolutely. It's very helpful.
Really?
I mean, I have like a Keurig, one Keurig. I drink it on my way down to the gym at 5 a.m. Because I've gone to a gym lately. But where was I going with that? So I learned those two things from her. Then what happened was when I started doing longer cardio, I saw it as a way where I was like, I don't just want to watch SportsCenter while I'm like, what a waste of time to just watch SportsCenter through this whole thing. I also don't want to watch the news. And I found that it makes you think of every minute you're doing it when you're watching stuff. Like time doesn't melt away. Then I had a Kindle, and I would have The Economist on the Kindle, and there was a text-to-speech reader. So I'd plug in headphones to the Kindle, and I would have the text-to-speech read me the Economist articles. And what the text-to-speech on the Kindle would do is it would underline the words as it was talking through them. And then what I found, just sort of through a moment of zen, I went, I'm sort of able to listen, and I'm sort of able to follow with this. Oh my God, I had the breakthrough. I can read while I'm doing this. Nothing's changing on the treadmill. You just set at one speed. Cars aren't jumping out of the way. Like you're just on a treadmill. You're looking ahead. You're reading. it's actually not that hard at all. You have a tablet, which is about 10 inches wide. It would be really cool with the iPad Pro, which is like 13 inches, like a TV size when you read. But it's great, and it makes you get through articles. And by reading, I would read books on there too. By reading, it makes the run go so fast. It's like podcasting. It makes the run go so fast that it's over before you know it, and you almost stay on it to finish a chapter.
Yeah,
it's fascinating. Often when I have a weekend where I go, you know what, I really should change things up. I should run outside. I'm a little bummed that I'm only going to be able to listen to something. I'm not going to get my reading done.
You spoiled yourself.
Yeah, I do. It's kind of crazy. What led you to the Peace Corps?
That's a good question. So I graduated college 2004, and I joined the Peace Corps in 2008. So 4-year gap. Usually people join the Peace Corps typically a year or 2 year out of college. I was doing different kind of political campaigns and activism stuff. I was a major in political science, and my first internship in college, going into my senior year, was that good? I was probably far away. It's probably a little better. So my first internship going to my senior college was Project Vote Smart out in Montana. A 10-week internship. Got room and board. And
in Montana?
Yeah, in Montana. It's a Project Vote Smart. You can look it up. It's a nonpartisan.
What town?
Phillipsburg, Montana. A nonpartisan research organization. It's on a ranch. It's like a campus, and it's like all these college students and recent graduates.
Is that near Bozeman?
Not far. It's actually, I don't think is it far? I mean, it's near, it's closer to Butte, about an hour from Butte, and it's 2 hours from Missoula.
Wow.
Missoula is really cool. It's beautiful. But everything there, like, is so spread out. Like, a 2-hour drive is a really peaceful, nice 2-hour drive. Like, a 2-hour drive here in New Jersey, where's it going to lead it to? It's going to lead you to just outside New York City, you know?
Right. No, that's the worst part is, like, not having the open space here is the worst. Like, the roads were probably 75 mile an hour there, right?
Yeah, they were. They were 75 miles. So everyone's going like 80, 85 miles.
It's amazing.
It was. It's beautiful out there. So, 10 weeks out there, room and board. Yeah, beautiful. Like, right near Glacier National Park, Yellowstone National Park. Amazing experience. 10 weeks there. And then they needed staff for the 2004 election. They hired me, my first job out of college. I'm like, cool, I did this. After that, I'm like, all right, I want to be a little bit closer to home. I grew up on Long Island. I want to do more activist stuff, because this is just like entering stuff in a keyboard and maybe some phone work, answer the phone, because we're just keeping up a research library online. I started working for Common Cause on public financing of elections, because the governor of Connecticut at the time got thrown in prison on corruption charges.
Was that Malloy?
No, Malloy's in office now. He's doing okay. Although there's arguments there in Connecticut, since it's a complete Democratic control. Right. There's no checks and balances.
Who was the governor then?
It was John Rowland then.
John Rowland.
And Jody Rowe replaced him, and the lieutenant governor. And she was all about approval. Lieutenant governor doesn't do anything. Every governor does different things in each state. Yeah. Like, for example, George W. Bush was governor of Texas. The governor of Texas doesn't really have the power. It's the lieutenant governor. Typically, it's the governor that has the power, but the governor is more of a figurehead in Texas. Huh. So in Connecticut, it's the way it's more traditionally is the governor does all the things. The lieutenant governor is all more PR and stuff.
Right.
So Jody Rowe, this very likable, moderate Republican woman, very popular, just wants to keep promoting her image. So there was a big groundswell for public finance of elections. And there was a belief, and people bet on this advocacy group said, you know what, here's a woman here, really not a fan of public finance elections, not really a liberal, but not terribly conservative, is probably going to sign this bill because it looks good. And that's what she's good at. She doesn't know policy, but she knows media. She's media savvy. And of course, we pushed it, and there were so many moments, a year long, this exciting campaign. The only state in the whole union that passed public finance of elections through the legislature. And it was like 90% Democrats, 10% Republicans. And here is the governor at the bill signing and stuff. It was pretty cool. The other two states that I don't know other states, I haven't kept up on it, but the other two states that passed public financing elections is Arizona and Maine, and they did it through a ballot initiative. After that, I actually, an exciting race was Ned Lamont for U.S. Senate. He was primarying Joe Lieberman as the anti-war candidate. But he was like this Greenwich millionaire running as a progressive Democrat. In another era, would just be considered like a rich Rockefeller Republican. Ned Lamont wins the primary. It's exciting. I'm there from the beginning. I'm all the way out in eastern Connecticut, Willimantic, which I think was the heroin capital of Connecticut. It's kind of close to Yukon. The middle of nowhere is called the Quiet Corner. And I was so burnt out after the primary, but they gave me a quasi promotion because they put me in headquarters. So here I'm like right near the campaign manager. I see Ned Lamont coming in and out. He had the general election, but Joe Lieberman ran as an independent.
Right.
So what he did was, and the Republican Party liked Joe, so they put up the weakest candidate possible in Connecticut, just some kind of figurehead who got 10% of the vote. Joe got like the overwhelming majority of Republicans, still got 33% of the Democrats, and got the majority of the independents. So he won the election by like 10 points. And there I probably would have, if Ned Lamont won, I was there so early, I probably would have been working in D.C. for him. Working for a U.S. Senator would have been cool. But I'm like, man, I'm out of a job. Okay, I'm 25 years old. I don't have my career fully in check. It's almost 2007. Okay, I always wanted to live and work abroad. Peace Corps always spoke to me. I better do it now before life happens. You know, and that's what led me to Peace Corps. I know that was a very like long, circular, roundabout way to tell you how I got into the Peace Corps.
They all are. Lives are long, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, if it only took 4 minutes, it's not the wind of the
You're right. So it was one of the most, other than them becoming a dad. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, Ava, love of my life. Other than becoming a dad, that was the most profound experience of my life. I would say Peace Corps. And
is that? Do they just send you somewhere, or do you have a choice?
I remember when I met with the recruiter, you have to fill out. Is that how it goes? I don't even remember. You have to fill. I guess I had to do the application first. I don't know. Somehow you get paired up. I spoke to the New York office. I got paired with the recruiter. He tells me what I need to do to get the application done and everything. The hardest part is to get. For me, the hardest part was to get the references. I had to drive up to Connecticut to get this guy to be my reference because he still wouldn't send it in. I had to watch him send it in. And they ask you, they're smart in how they ask you a reference. They ask you for a volunteer reference, an employer reference, and then a friend that you knew for at least 2 years.
Why is it so stringent?
Because they don't want to just accept anybody. Like, they're making a commitment. They're devoting resources to put you in a third world country. They want you to be committed to it. It's a 2-year commitment you make. I mean, people do inevitably drop off, but they want the retention rate to be as high as possible. I mean, for numbers wise, it looks good, but also because you don't want, your Corps to drop out. You don't see people dropping out of the military. It's a Peace Corps. The Corps is like the army for hippies.
Yeah.
So when I went there, I told the recruiter, I'm like, yeah, I'm open to sub-Sahara Africa. He's like, we're not a travel agency, but tell me where you're going to go. I'm like, I'll go anywhere, really. I'm like, I don't really want to go to the Caribbean because I've traveled to the Caribbean. I've gone there on vacation, so I'd rather see something different. I'm like, but sub-Sahara Africa seems kind of cool. Lesotho, that little kingdom in South Africa seems kind of neat. And I'm like, oh, sub-Sahara Africa. And then they oriented me to the field. They're like, you got nominated sub-Sahara Africa for the health field because there's a big push for the health field. This is one thing that you could say positive about George W. Bush. Before him, nobody provided as much AIDS funding for sub-Saharan Africa as Bush did. The only problem that Bush did is that he didn't quite do it the best way possible. There was too much stringency on it due to the Christian right. So like what we did often was promoting when it came to, preventing AIDS, the ABCs, abstain, be faithful, use condoms. Yeah. Bush did not promote using condoms. So there was funding, but it was through these other outside agencies. What you saw is once, and I was in office there, it was really cool seeing it, like the sentiment for Zambians when Barack Obama got elected. I stayed up late at night listening to like BBC, Voice of America with my friend in the village. I had other friends that were staying at a hotel, but my friend in my village loved Obama, and I just connected with him. It was just cool, like experiencing that with him. And of course, the election got called, at 10, 11 p.m. at night in America. It's like 6 in the morning in Zambia. We stayed up the whole night listening to it.
So were people excited?
Oh, yeah, big time.
Like locals?
Yeah, well, they said to me, it was a weird question. People are like, how does it feel to be ruled by a black man? I'm like, we don't exactly have it like you're being ruled. It's a democracy. Because in African countries, I'm just giving an example of Zambia because that's where I was. So the towns are more like democratically run. You have like the head of the town. You also have the president of the country. But in the villages and stuff, it's very much kind of like local chiefdoms and stuff. Yeah. You have the chief, you have the headman. It's a little bit different. It's sort of like you're considered a subject and you're being ruled by the chief. So it's a little bit more old school. And I lived down the road from my chief, which was kind of an interesting experience.
Do they dress in the garb and stuff like that, or is it more modern?
It is kind of more modern, but for example, what I would say is that you don't see, unless they're in the field farming, you don't see the men wearing shorts. They wear pants. And in the village, the women are supposed to wear what we call like a shitenge, like a wraparound and stuff. You shouldn't wear pants. You know, I mean, sometimes you'd see some of the Zambian women come in from the town and wear pants, and some would say that's not really appropriate. If they're in the village, they should be wearing the shitenge and stuff, because in the town they'd wear jeans and it was fine. But you know, they asked us to adopt the customs, like white man and white woman, we're going to wear pants in the village. And you know, the shitenges, even though they looked at us, we were so foreign, it really didn't matter. But Peace Corps does such a long training, which is awesome, 9-week training, which is exciting, a big social experiment. They train you to really be as, you know, socially conscious and culturally sensitive as possible, where I just inevitably just wore pants.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's hot, right?
Yeah, it gets hot. I mean, it depends what part of the country you're in. Where I am, it was really hot.
Yeah.
Was it on this podcast or the last one I was telling you about bucket baths?
But it must have been on this one, because I don't. Yeah, it was on this one.
Yeah, well, see, now they're kind of merging together. Me being a guest on yours, and then just going back to back, and now you being, I guess, on my first one.
Well, that's funny. So, did they all were like, they knew the Kenyan story and everything with President Obama? Or did they just more come from the color angle?
Oh, well, it was a little bit of both. So that's funny. I forgot about that. So what they said, yeah, he's going to take care of Africa because his father's Kenyan. You know what I mean? And the way we identify in our culture, we identify that the children identify more with the father's culture than the mother's culture. So even though he's American, to us, he's Kenyan. And of course, Africa comes first. So it's great that we have a president that really is going to hold Africa near and dear to their heart.
Sounds like Donald Trump with the middle of the country. It's about as close.
I don't want to go there with that. I know where you're going. I don't go. But here was something a friend told me. She was asked a question being like, well, now that the Obamas are in the White House, they're going to change the name to the White House. That was kind of interesting. But it was cool because and this is where I think I have, I'm sure that partially formed my positive sentiments towards Obama, because I lived in a country where they saw the most powerful nation in the world elect a black man to the highest office possible. The first time it ever happened. And I thought, symbolically, it speaks volumes, because they're saying, hey, you know, here's a man who came from a Kenyan father and, you know, a white gypsy mother who rose to the highest office in the land. It's like anything's possible. Anyone can accomplish anything. And, you know, the majority of the world are people of color. So I think it really created this goodwill and positive sentiments. And if you see it, I mean, even I was just telling you how, like, you know, I was reading those campaign books, like before the election, Hillary lost. The two of the most recent books I read too was I read Edward Klein's The Amateur, which is kind of like an Obama hatchet job. I learned some information on there, but it was very partisan. But then I read Jodi Kantor's The Obamas, which was like just a great tabloid reading, because it just talked about, it focused a lot on Michelle and how Michelle helped influence Obama's presidency, and kind of gives you an inside look behind the curtain, and how frustrated they were because within the first few months he was in office, his popularity already started to go down. Yeah. But then he goes overseas and he's like this beloved figure. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like he's like 75% approval worldwide. Yeah. And like 48% approval here. I mean, okay, it fluctuated anywhere between 45 and 55. But I don't think ever since he got elected, I don't think he ever got much higher than 55% ever. Yeah,
I was listening to something today where they were saying that once you're elected, the minute you're there, you start leaking approval.
I mean,
it just starts leaking out of you.
I guess now there's certain outliers. I mean, look, this is a very like modern, hyper partisan world. I think Bill Clinton was the last president to actually have a honeymoon period, because usually they give you 90 days honeymoon period where you can get stuff done. Right. And they say that the Clintons Bill squandered it on giving Hillary the mantle to try and pass health care, and that was a disaster. Then Bush gets appointed by the Supreme Court. So people already thought it was an illegitimate presidency because of everything that happened with Florida. And what was it? And Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11, that's where I remember most vividly. I'm sure other places captured it, where Bush couldn't even walk like with the people usually do it on Inauguration Day, because there's so many protesters throwing eggs at him and stuff. By the way, they say if there was any time they were going to abolish the Electoral College, that would have been the best chance in 2000. Yeah. That's another point, because, you know, with this whole thing here. So he didn't have any goodwill. But then 9/11 happens and his approval rating's 90%. So that's a real outlier there. That spike there where everyone's rallying around the flag, where there was this really It was a beautiful moment, beautiful time. And the funny thing is, actually, for 911, I was actually abroad also. I was in Italy.
Oh.
Yeah, so like so many big moments. I wasn't even in the country, and I went to Franklin Pierce College in Ringe, New Hampshire. Now Franklin Pierce University, although we call it Franklin Pierce College. Although it's a small liberal arts school. And when I told someone about this guy, I was telling him about it in Connecticut, this older guy, and he's like, oh, it's one of these draft dodging schools. It's true. It started in the 1960s as a school that kind of sprung up out of nowhere so people could avoid the Vietnam War. I went there because I thought it was a beautiful campus, and they offered this program called the Walk Across Europe, where literally we could backpack across Europe. 15 miles a day you're walking, and you're sleeping under like this big tent, and there's like 25 of you and stuff. And that's what spoke to me. And my sophomore year, I was one of the few students that jumped at it to do a study abroad sophomore year. In the fall of 2001, I just remember the World Trade Center going down, and we're like in this vineyard in Italy, and I couldn't believe it. And I could not get through to anybody in New York. My family there, I called my grandma. I was able to get through to her in Philadelphia, see what was going on. I had a cousin who went to high school in downtown Manhattan. She was a sophomore in high school. And that was my first thought. The World Trade Center is going. Oh my God, I'm trying to reach to see if everybody's okay.
Yeah.
My dad's on a business trip in Texas. He thought that he was going to have to rent a car to drive back. He said he was able to fly into Philadelphia, meet up with my mom there. He's happy because I have a lot of family there. But that was a crazy time. And I remember I left. I was on van team that night. So I had the responsibilities of cooking the meal. And I remember my co-van team partner actually I came back like 20 minutes later, and he threw out the food. I didn't even have a meal that night.
Oh.
And then he was like, it's still good. You get it in the garbage. He's like, I don't feel that bad. It was funny because it was kind of really awkward. And I was pissed. And I remember I woke up early and everybody else that morning and had breakfast because I didn't eat that night. And literally, like 5 years later, I'm at like some kind of college reunion. My friend who was on the van team, he came up to me and he's like, dude, I am so sorry about that night. I threw out your food. I felt so bad about that. And he's like carrying that with him this whole time. And I just chuckled. I'm like, it's all good, man.
Oh my God.
But isn't it funny? He's telling me 5 years, 6 years later how sorry he is that happened.
Yeah, people hold things.
Yeah, they do.
And a lot of times, like, you move on, you don't even realize it. And it's like, you should have just asked.
Yeah, because, this is college in New Hampshire, so I'm going to study abroad. Most of the people I'm on this trip with, 25 of us, are from, like, New England area. There's a few New Yorkers, and we were the ones that rushed to the payphone. This is before we had cell phones and stuff. It was cool. There was something so freeing about it.
Yeah.
And now we're, like, so restricted almost by the technology and everything.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, my cell phone, my early on cell phone died that day in New York. Of all days, it just died. Like I could hear, but the talking part, the talk piece didn't work anymore.
Because you were at NYU, right?
Yeah.
You were a sophomore then, or freshman?
Sophomore.
So that's where you graduated, NYU.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Okay. I had That's funny. I actually, my beard was so long when I came back.
Really?
Oh, it was incredibly long. And everyone, I remember we spent most of our time, my trip in Europe was in rural France and rural Italy. And we finished in Paris. And all of us guys are having these long beards because we're backpacking this whole time. And you see these people yelling at us, Bin Laden, Bin Laden. I'm like, oh my God.
No. And
I went on a trip to Florida with my dad. I had a cousin getting bat mitzvahed. And they stopped us. They pulled me and him out of the line because of my beard. My dad's like, my son's being unfairly targeted. And my beard was crazy long. But I was invited to be in my friend's movie, who was actually a film major at NYU.
Yeah.
He was doing some kind of film. The film went bad, so I never ended up being in the movie. But he had me with this girl that was supposed to be in the film, and he introduced me. He's like, oh, this is my friend Josh. And he was a pretty girl, but she was someone that liked your metrosexual guys, and I looked really rugged. He's like, here's my friend. He's kind of rustic. He just needed anyone, kind of like your whole Romeo and Juliet thing. Yeah. It's like that love story and stuff. He ended up doing something else because his film got jammed up, but I remember that day.
That's funny.
Yeah.
How'd you meet your wife?
I met, that's a long story too. We met, she was living in the Bronx, and I was meeting up with a friend up in the Fordham area. And I was getting something at the Starbucks, and I saw her there, and she was just reading something. I just went up to her and I said hello.
Are you the type of person who would do that?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I don't know. Sometimes it just depends. I mean, I've done dating sites too and stuff. You know what I mean? It's almost.
I'm not usually the kind of person, but it's funny how you can be moved in a certain moment to just do something. Like there's some kind of magnetic energy telling you to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. One time I actually once got a girl's number on a subway too. That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you were. Tell me about this. Tell me about NYU and 911.
It was completely horrifying because you think of New York as so small, but it's actually quite big.
Yeah.
And there's so much stuffed into it that NYU is actually not amazingly close to the World Trade Center. It's close enough, but it's not close enough where you were feeling any effects from that. Mm-hmm. I remember I could see the people walking up the road with the ash all over them. So that was real. But it was far enough that a lot of people mistakenly would think you're right there, like you're pretty much right under it, right? Because New York just feels so much smaller. But what is it, 14 square miles or something like that? But I remember coming right off the PATH train and then seeing a plane fly right over the city.
Oh, you saw it?
Well, to a degree. I came off the PATH train at about 8:45 because I had a class that was to be taught by Governor Pataki's brother. That was my teacher. It was science or something like that. And it was in an underground classroom. So I figured I'll go to that class because if anyone knows anything, it's going to be the governor's brother. Lo and behold, we had the whole class. Nothing was ever brought up about it. Except, all right, looks like something's happened. And he taught the whole class. But I got off the PATH train and I was walking east. So there's brownstones, so you can't see beyond your block. But I could hear just like something, it was a vivid plane sound. It was right there. It was like weird how low it felt. And I could see a plane flying over. So looking in the eastern direction I could see the plane flying that way. Flying towards the south, obviously, from north to south, and I'm walking east. So I can't see anything. I can't see anything that happens once it left my view. But I saw a plane where you could read like the letters on the plane. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And then it sounded as though when a garbage truck makes its loud noises picking up the garbage in the early morning when it's the dead of quiet and it's just like steel and loud. And that's what I heard. It's New York City though. I don't know and that was pretty far away. So I didn't know what that
You heard it was like a block away.
Yeah. I heard it as if it were a garbage truck right around the corner, but it's New York City. So it's not that big, but it was loud enough that it was the sound you heard. And I didn't tie the two things together. I didn't know if a plane was, sometimes planes can fly lower than you think, you never know.
Yeah.
And I turned the corner and then I'm looking through the Washington Monument, and through the Washington Monument down Fifth Avenue, you can see the World Trade Center right through it. Mm-hmm. And I could see through the Washington Monument and there was a hole in the one of the buildings. And I was like, oh my God. But again, in terms of scale, you don't know what the size of that hole means from where you are. From there, it could easily be like a little dinky plane. Like the hole didn't feel vast. It's really the craziness of scale. But I just remember walking and going, oh my God, that's insane. And then there was a woman walking up the road in the other direction. And you could sense everything like stopped for a minute, even where we were. And people were just acting weird. And then she said, what's going on? What happened? I said, a plane just flew into the World Trade Center. And she turned around and looked and then just fell on the ground. Like, it was almost like The Walking Dead. It was like she just fell on the ground to her knees and started bawling. And I was like, okay, this is really, what do I do? So I just was like, yeah, I kept walking.
Typical New Yorker.
Well, there was a lot like
I'm messing with it.
I don't know what's going on.
So she was the first person that you saw had such a dramatic reaction
that far away. Yeah. And people were noticing it. It was almost like a video game, where something weird happens in a video game and everyone predictably in the narrative and scene looks and, acts funny.
Yeah.
And then I so I went to the class in an hour and 15 minutes. And at this point, the building, another plane flew in, one building fell, another building fell while I'm in this class and nothing is said. And I get out, and this was my time where I was really into nutrition and weightlifting because I had come home from college break in my freshman year. And I remember my friend's mother saying, boy, they feed you well there, huh? And I'm like, oh. Oh, and I remember it just like, it struck me because
I had the freshman 15, huh?
I guess. And it was one of those deals we could talk about. You don't realize you don't realize your constitution is changing because you see yourself every day. So you don't notice anything. I didn't feel that different. Who knows if she was even right, But anyway, I remember that was break. And then I remember my dad dropped me off back at school, 6 a.m. because that's how he does things on my second semester. And I got there at 6. Everyone was asleep. There was nothing to do in the dorm. And I went down to the gym. And from that day forward, I've never stopped working out. But anyway, so this would have been the next semester after summer. And I was not only had I gotten into lifting, but I'd gotten insane into the nutrition, like where you're counting stuff, you're eating egg beater omelets. Everything is just down to the gram you're charting. It's a terrible way to live. It's just not worth it. But I had I'd gotten down to at one point like 158. So I got really like lean, but I had this whole thing still going, this nutrition thing going. And then on the one day,
you just talking about this makes me want to have a cheeseburger right now.
Yeah.
Bacon cheeseburger.
And I was a vegetarian at the time.
Oh my goodness.
But on that Tuesday, that was my cheat day. So I'd go into New York City and I would eat I remember I went to Johnny Rockets and I would have like a milkshake and a veggie burger. I know, because I was vegetarian. And then on the other end of classes, I'd go and I'd have pizza or vice versa, whichever one. And so that was my cheat day. And so I got out of the class. I walked to the one pizza place I would always go to right on 4th Street. And I walked in and I ordered my pizza and I said, "Oh, I know a plane hit. So what happened?" I still didn't know what happened. You didn't have internet on your phone. You didn't have any sense. You had no idea what happened. I just saw smoke. So who knows what that means? And then the pizza guy's just like, a plane flew into the other building. One came down. The other came down. They're gone. And I was just like, oh, Jesus Christ. That was how I found out. And then from that point forward, you don't know, you have no idea what to do. I've nowhere to go. I was commuting in at that point from New Jersey.
Oh, you were a commuter.
I missed my deadline. I lived at NYU my first year, and then I just missed my deadline for sophomore year housing. So I had to commute from home in Mahwah. And I often think on the train that day, since I was coming off the PATH train at 8:45, anybody who was on my train that morning from Mahwah to Hoboken, anybody who was on that who was going the other way on the path to World Trade Center, who knows what happened? There could have been people on that plane with the timing who potentially didn't make it. I mean, who knows if they did? Who knows if they didn't? I don't know. But I've always thought that. But after this happened, there's no you don't know what to do. Who's speaking for anyone? There's no loudspeaker through New York City to be like, everybody who's going to New Jersey had, So it's all kind of oral tradition. It's a story. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I remember just being by myself. I don't have a phone that works at this point. And there was a calm, though. I remember going into this and saying, this could be it. But I have nothing. That's the one part of apocalypse that always pervertedly works in my thinking, which is I'm off the hook for everything now. Like everything that's due doesn't matter. Everything that I have a responsibility doesn't matter. And there's a fleeting moment when you're expecting everything. People thought we were getting bombed. Like it was so bad you had no idea. And I remember walking up 3rd Avenue and there were like News Radio 880 people like playing outside of their storefronts. And it was like surreal. You felt like you were in a movie where like the cameras jolting around, and everybody's just aimlessly walking. No one knows where to go. And so I remember walking up and then down to Union Square. And then I saw somebody who I saw a kid there who I went to high school with. I just randomly saw him there and we kind of hung out. We hung together and then we walked back to campus. He allowed me to use his phone so I could call home. And then I remember my dad said, when I called home, he said, all right, if you can head up to the George Washington Bridge, Uncle Robert's going to send police cars there. Like my Uncle Robert worked at the Bergen County Police fixing the cars. Mm-hmm. And he's like, he's going to get someone there. And I was like, first off, thank you. But second off, it is like so far from here to the George Washington Bridge, Greenwich Village to the GWB is insanely far.
That really
is.
It's
like, what, 120 blocks? Yeah. And so I said, okay. And he's like, find a place to sleep. You might have to bunker down for a few days. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go on the assumption that New York wants people out of the city. So I'm going to head back. At this point, I head then up back to the 9th Street Path Station where I'd come in from originally. It's locked. It's closed off. You can't even go in there.
Oh my
and you're
God.
just like, and then at this point I hooked up with this other straggler guy, this older Indian guy. And then we heard from somebody, it literally is oral tradition. You're just hearing stuff and they're letting people on boats at the 38th Street terminal. So we're at 9th Street now. And so at this point, you don't know what's up, what's down. It's still September. It's a warm day. So you're walking and walking and walking. And me and this guy just said, hey, where do we got to go? Let's make a run. Let's make a walk for it because we'll head back. We're both headed back to New Jersey. We walked all the way up. Maybe it was 6th Ave or something. We walked all the way up. We had a whole conversation. I obviously never saw the guy again. But we were able to get on a boat at 38th and it took us into Hoboken Terminal. And at that point, I think it was 7 World Trade Center collapsed while we're on the water. One of the smaller ones, but big enough. And it just, the whole thing goes.
Yeah, the seven building. That was like the underrated one. Yeah.
And I just remember we get on, everyone's just waving you through. Just get on your trains.
Oh, really? So the trains were running
No
from
charge.
Hoboken on.
Yeah,
of course.
Everyone just get on. And I remember I've never been so relieved to make it home and to walk up to my house. I knew I would be there for a week because we weren't going anywhere. And I remember walking around the corner and my dad was shocked.
That you made it home.
I got home at 6 p.m.
And he's like, what are you doing here?
Yeah. And I just remember going up to my room and just watching everything, watching all of the tape, watching all of the rumor and innuendo and what's what. And you just had no idea what tomorrow meant. As terrible as it is to say, at a lesser degree, I felt that way on the Trump election. Not as buildings and people were killed and all that, obviously, but that morose feeling. And then classes were canceled the rest of the week. I started looking up University of Miami. I was like, I'm out of here. And my parents just said, no, you could do whatever you want, just finish. And so I, at that point, went straight through to finish in the middle of senior year, 3.5 years.
Oh, you did 3.5 years. Okay.
Just to get out.
Yeah. What was it like for the rest of the semester? Classes were canceled for the rest of the week. So you came back that Monday. What was it like that Monday forward through the semester?
Everything was changed. And, but again, NYU is far enough away from ground zero that you're not, it's not in your face. So you actually can live. New York's funny like that. It's very compartmentalized where you can be in one part and something terrible can be happening on the other end, or something, the UN could be having its huge assembly 2 blocks away and you would never know.
Yeah, no, you're right.
There. So it's very compartmentalized that way, but it was a downer. I mean, it was very hard. And there was actually a point in that year where I had a class that was at night. Was it that year? I think so. I had a class at night, and this is when I was still really into the eating and the exercising and all this. And maybe my blood sugar spiked or something, and I got on the PATH train at night. This is at a point I ended up moving into a place in Hoboken because I was just shot, and I was like, I can't do this commute anymore.
Yeah, I don't blame you, man.
On top of the 9/11, everything just felt awful.
Yeah, there's some PTSD there.
Couldn't move yourself forward, and so I got to Hoboken, which was better. I mean, it actually still ends up being a ways, but it was much better. And I remember getting on the path at 9:30 at night, and then I remember opening up my eyes, laying on the floor with 5 people over me. I just passed out.
This is one random day in the semester.
I just completely passed out. Whether it was fatigue, low blood sugar, whatever it was.
Do you remember
and I
what
didn't
month
feel
that was?
I don't remember. But I don't remember it coming. I don't even remember it coming on. I don't remember a part of this. And I passed out, and then I said, what the hell happened? And somebody said to me, you were standing there, and then you kind of slowly went back against the door, and then you slowly slid down the door, and then you were just on the floor.
It sounds like a watershed moment to you, as if that was kind of the end of that chapter, the whole trauma of 9/11 finally went through you.
Yeah, and I just remember coming to and saying to myself, oh my God, we are like not in control. We are not true custodians of our body when something like that can happen, where you're completely in control 1 second, and then without any thought, you're just waking up on the ground looking up at people. And I do often think, crossing fingers, hopefully that's what death is like, because it wasn't that terrible.
Well,
not looking forward to that, but I'm just saying, like, it was not. But I always remember I was very unsure of myself for a while after that, because you're like, if that can just happen, now you have a little bit of a complex about, ooh, could that happen again?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you maybe think, I'm not going to stand, I'm going to sit, it was really frightening from that point of view. I actually was still commuting home, I think, at that point, because I remember I called my dad when I got off the train and I said, I just fainted on the train. He's like, are you able to walk right now? I'm like, yeah. He's like, all right, well, just get home. We'll talk about it.
So maybe that's what spurred you to be like, all right, I can't do this long ass commute. I gotta be in Hoboken. That is, I mean, obviously you don't, it's just how things are just imprinted in your memory, because it's sort of like everybody remembers, you know, if you're old enough, at you're a certain age, everybody remembers where you were at 911 and it has a vivid like recall of like what happened. I didn't know that. Have you ever shared that on your own podcast, your experience?
I think so.
Really?
I think so.
Because that is something. And you you weren't in the eye of the storm, but you were in the storm.
Well, isn't that the funny thing with memory too, that so the people who have it worse are the ones who are right there.
Hell yeah.
Who were in it obviously have it way worse, but their thing was over pretty soon, as terrible as that is. The next degree is those who were in it and got out, or in it, or who were right around it and got out and had to hear those bodies hitting the pavement outside, which is just the most awful thing.
Well, you have the 911 responders bill, how that's still like a political issue and stuff. Jon Stewart shepherding behind it and stuff. You know, like this is going on approaching 16 years ago, and it's still impacting us.
Absolutely. No, and it's still, and then people move on. That's like the worst part of it. People just move on and they don't care anymore. And it's sort of what keeps us. It's what allows me to pass out on a train and to move on and to not let it affect me. It's what gets soldiers. I'm not comparing myself to this. It's what gets soldiers who are in war and can see themselves through it, even if it's with help at home. It's a necessary thing to keep these bodies alive for the 80 or 90 years that they're going to live, that they have to be able to get through some heinous stuff and move forward and not be consumed by it. But it's very fascinating when I have my experience right on that day. I wasn't that affected by it though. I mean, in terms of, physically, I didn't lose anybody in it, but I was close to it in a way. I was like arbitrage close to it. I was on the outskirts. But it's interesting the way nobody's experience, though, is worse than anybody else's, if you think about it. Sure, the people who were on the outskirts or who were in it and got out, they'll have to think about their friends who were in it, or they'll have to think about why did I make it and others didn't. But I'm talking in degrees. That experience is not amazingly different than my experience, which is not amazingly different than my friend who was at Manhattan College, you know, in the Bronx, and they were up on their roof watching it happen, versus your experience happening in Italy. We all have such a vivid experience with it, whether you're in it or out of it.
I think I had a cousin-in-law, well, my cousin, he's my cousin too, my cousin's husband, who was working near there, and he saw people jumping out of the building. So, I mean... That's
awful. That's
I know.
Just,
so, I mean, so I agree with you on one front, but I still think some people it was more harrowing.
Yeah. Without a doubt. But then the other part is, we've seen those too. Not in real life, but I mean, not with our own eyes of the setting, but the pictures.
I mean,
which is just, it's one of those things it's like Faces of Death. Don't look. I have to look.
Of course you do. You to kind of, to tie this up, that whole experience. It reminds, and I feel like, of course, we did. I was just on your podcast, and now this is the opening of my podcast, so they just bleed together. So I don't remember everything that we spoke about in yours compared to mine, but I know we mentioned probably in the last one we talked about Ezra Klein on Tim Ferriss's podcast. It was fascinating because Ezra Klein said, the type of stuff that's happening in our political history in America, how America's at the center of politics, because sometimes there's different things, different parts of the world, politics is the center of gravity.
Right.
And in American politics, you kind of look at the moments, it's not always such big things, bang, bang, bang. Like we kind of had the fall of, the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And then it was like real stability under Bush 1 and then Clinton. You know what I mean? That's kind of a boring time. And then you have this crazy election, Bush v. Gore, which, I mean, I wouldn't call it a footnote because it's going to be memorable, like studied for generations, like what happened there. But then you have 9/11 under Bush's watch. And as a reaction to Bush, you have the first African-American president, everything that's happening. We're still in the age of the war on terror. And now we have the ushering of President Trump, which is so, and Trump isn't an ideological character, but the thing is, it's his policies are so in contrast to what Obama was representing, was all about. I mean, kind of like this herky-jerkiness.
The hacker is in the henhouse.
Yeah.
He's a hacker. He hacked our system in a way.
But yeah, you're right, because there's a feeling of an instability. You don't know what's going to happen yet, but there's that feeling. Like, you don't know what the heck's going to happen with the Affordable Care Act. So many other things. I mean, there's just things flying. And Ezra Klein raised a really good point. He said, usually this is not normal in history of humans, where you have like this kind of such tumultuousness, like the string of like kind of like since 9/11 being the watershed moment, these past, going on, we're entering the 17th year, where each year seems like it's so pivotal.
Yep.
And it's like, it doesn't seem like it's going to stop or slow down. It's, It
never does until it does. It sort of happens in like the work world and the tech world of corporations or whatever, or in a company where we sort of have a startup mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So you stay lean and that works out when the year's over. But when projects are piling on, you have this feeling of, I can't keep the tunnel vision I need to on the projects because it just feels like it's getting piled on and piled on. And you're like, this is never going to end. I just need it to end. I need to get to a point where everything's chill. And then what happens is projects finish, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden it's chill. And you go, oh, it's chill. Where are the projects?
Yeah. Like what's next? You see,
it's weird how that happens.
No, it is. It's really weird how that happens. And who was, I guess, This is a conversation I had with Nuno recently. We were talking about Joe Paterno. And, Joe Paterno, the legendary coach at Penn State, and how his career just ended the worst possible way possible.
And then just died.
Yeah, and he died. He's like, oh, now I have time to catch a mesh. He just died. But think about it. If that didn't happen, all that crap, you know what I mean? And, he got what he deserved. I mean, that was horrendous.
Uh-huh.
Just the whole cover up, everything with Penn State. But the thing is, I'd imagine if none of that happened, he'd still probably be coaching Penn State football. Right. Even if he's just a figurehead and he's in his wheelchair, he'd still be there.
Well, it was like the Mets and Bob Murphy. He retired and he was dead in 5 months or something like that.
It's weird. It's like
sometimes you just need that. You need the constant motion.
You need the pull.
It's sort of like we were saying with exercise. You need the distraction of motion to almost make the healthy things happen without you thinking about it.
You're right.
Work and idleness. Idleness can cause a backup. It can cause an inertia that's dangerous. Whereas constantly moving can almost keep your mind off of it, which maybe keeps your mind off of eating itself. There's so much that's psychosomatic. I remember a hockey player who I read about, who a really fast skater in the past, and he would score and he'd just go end to end, and he would come off the ice, and one time they gave him oxygen, and he had oxygen, and he went, oh my God, that was amazing. And then every single time he came off, he needed to get oxygen, and then at the end they found out that there was nothing in it.
Huh? Who was this guy?
I forget his name.
What era is this from?
I'll have to look it up.
Google a guy, the fast skater needing oxygen.
I'll have to look it up. It's one of these things though, and it's like with this Dr. Sarno or whatever with the back pain, that he says a lot of back pain is actually just stressors in your life that are just piling into these certain places. Because the human body, and this is probably can be our final kind of thought. The human body is such an amazingly put together and assembled thing that how in the hell does everybody have back issues? Like, it makes no sense. We are this computer. We talk about computers that last for 4 years, 5 years, some which have failed obsolescence or forced obsolescence, and they're done in 3. So you buy a new one. These things die, and look how small they are. Look at an iPad; it's like 10 inches. This body, which has biology and digestion and temperature management and all this, it's the ultimate computer that lasts up to 100 years potentially. And a goddamn back is going. The most important part of it goes. There's something to that. There's something to the way we sit. There's something to the way we live. There's something to the way we're probably carrying a bit more extra pounds than we should. And it's just, it's something that builds up and builds up. And then maybe we don't exercise, or we exercise the wrong way, or we don't stand enough. But sure, that can be it. And I think often if a back injury comes from a quick motion, something that actually causes it, or being hit by something. But too many people have back issues for that to be the answer when we have this perfectly calibrated and constructed machine. And I think a lot of it is psychosomatic. Where else would we hold things? Why is a burden the monkey on our back? Why is it what we hold there? I think it makes sense. There's some invisible thing, which many of the things that go on behind our eyeballs and our head are invisible to everybody else. I think when people have a lot of back pain, they're carrying something. I have a lot of back pain.
What do you carry, Matt?
I don't know.
I guess we're gonna have to wait for the next time.
I think I think I put the brakes on a lot, as opposed to just let myself go. Because it's scary to just let yourself go. It's scary to jump out of the plane. You're worried that there's not going to be a parachute. And I think sometimes you need to jump. You need to be aggressive. And you need to carry that sentiment with you.
So what's your New Year's resolution this year then for 2017?
To be more organized, maybe. Try to utilize my time.
Oh, come on! It sounded like you were ready to be bold. And
I don't know what it is yet. I often think like it would be just cool to move to California, like Jeff Pearlman did, or like all these other people do, and you just live in it. But then the grass is never greener. You always have to keep that in your mind.
Does your wife want to move to California?
No, I don't think so.
No.
But of course she'll say she would if it was the right opportunity. But that's a lot of stress. Well, what if it's not the right opportunity when you're single, as we were talking about?
Well, here my 2017 resolution is to have this not be just a pilot episode, but have this up and running, not herky jerky. Yeah. I want to be able to produce prolific content like the great Matt McQueen and the Mixed Minus podcast. Be part of your network. Josh, off the press.
Yo, all right, that's good, right?
Yeah, awesome.
How'd you feel about the first one?
It was great. We're still recording though,
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I know. I was meaning to.
Okay.
We're not going to actually talk like we normally talk when people don't hear it.
Well, they can hear anything,
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess we got to cut out part of your son's thing, but
we will. That'll be fine. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Number one.
Number one. You know what's fascinating though is that when you were talking about your experience of 911 2001, I almost felt like your face got younger. It's almost as if like the 19-year-old you was channeled. It was crazy. And then when you finally got out of that moment, you came back, you're like, weird. Here's Matthew of 2016, almost 2017.
And how weird how different that 19-year-old you is. That's half a lifetime ago almost.
Absolutely.
How crazy is that? That was the same you walking around the earth.
I know.
And how different you are.
I know. I'm gonna take these off now. Great.
Cool.
Thanks.